Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Scott Gerber is with us today, law professor from ONU. We talked back in May about the Presidential Commission looking into the Supreme Court and whether changes need to be made, and it all kind of came after the Democrats talked about packing the court and those kind of things. So now the work is done. Neither side seems happy with it. One of the things you talked about in an op-ed you wrote was this idea of judicial independence, and it got me thinking, well, can we even look into whether, can we even say that we want to just randomly make changes? Is that something that's covered under that notion?
Excellent point. And the purpose of my op-ed was to point out that you can't credibly, safely, efficiently decide whether to reform any institution, including the Supreme Court of the United States, until you understand, until the president understands, until Congress understands why the institution was created the way it was in the first place. And the report, which is about 300 pages long, says almost nothing about that.
Yeah, you know, one of the people you cite, one of the founding fathers is John Adams, and it was interesting to read some of his thoughts on it, even about how to choose a Supreme Court justice to make sure that it was non-political, those kind of things. If you can, hearken back to what he thought about this idea.
Yeah, well, I wrote a book. My last academic book published by Oxford University Press was exactly on this point. You know, how did we get the U.S. Supreme Court that we got in Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution? And my conclusion was that John Adams had devised the theory in a 1776 pamphlet called Thoughts on Government, where he wanted the court to be a separate institution of government. He wanted judges to have life tenure as long as they behaved well, and he wanted their compensation secure from diminishment while they were in office. And again, the report says nothing about that.
That's one of my favorite points in there, and it's simplified so well. This notion, as you mentioned, and John Adams talked about it, as long as they behave themselves, why would you take them away? They've already have the resume to be in that position. Talk about that a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not opposed to certain reforms. You know, I actually think that the term limits and age limits would be acceptable, because when the framers created the federal courts and the Supreme Court in particular, they never imagined that people would live as long as they did. And so, you know, no one needs to be in the same position as Supreme Court justice or whatever it might be for 30 years, especially if they're in their 80s or in their 90s. There are lots of people that are qualified to do the job. And sometimes, you know, fresh ideas are a good thing. So I do think that there are some appropriate reforms. But again, you can't effectively discuss what they should be unless you understand why the court was formed the way it was initially.
I love this topic when you brought it up, because it made me think back to, I had a quarter in college where I had two professors that were so on opposite ends of this idea. One was a strict constitutionalist who thought, if the person coming up with this decision wasn't wearing a white wig, we don't change any of this. And there was another one that thought the Constitution, living, breathing document, and you have to apply it to what's going on. Is that still the fight that we're talking about here in a general sense?
Yeah, but recent polls show that the American people, their trust in the court has dropped to about 40%. So 60% of the American people think that the U.S. Supreme Court is just another political institution, and that's in large part a result of how partisan and ideological the appointment process has become. So you have to be really ideological out front, controversial, et cetera, to get noticed, and then you have to be young enough so you'll last for 30 years, and then the president has to decide all I care about is whether the person thinks like I do, will vote like I want, things like that. And that's not what the framers wanted. It is not.
Yeah, when I read some of the articles of the op-eds, I got to think John Adams would just be cringing, spinning in his grave today to see how politicized the process has become, right?
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's broken. It's literally broken. And I think everyone that's been following the news over the last several years realizes that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting piece, and folks can go online and check out that op-ed. I love how you write, because you take a very tough topic to understand, you simplify it for dummies like me, so that we can discuss it, and it's very well done. Thank you so much for talking about it today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. You're welcome, and I appreciate those kind words.
Nice chatting with you. We'll be back right after this.